Hello. Well, hopefully this is working. Hello and welcome to the first church of permaculture. Today, I'll be talking about science, spirituality, permaculture, and proof. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how proof, the burden of proof, has a direction to it, which is one of the important things that we need to understand. Now, if you're following me on Facebook here live, thank you. Thank you for joining. And also, try if you like, you can try to leave questions. If I see those and can see those, I will try to answer them. If you have questions about the burden of proof in permaculture and this relationship between science and spirituality and permaculture and this whole transcendence thing we talk a lot about. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So, I can start by saying, I greet you, salute you, O country folk, pay attention, I address you. In brief, I gather my fame is such that I cannot fail to impress you. I'm noted as a scientist, practitioner, and specialist. I'm Dr. Dulcamara, physician who is famous for my treatment of cases known all over this world and other places. To benefit humanity is my supreme ambition, to empty out the hospitals, my dedicated mission. My aim is health and happiness alike for rich and poor. For every ill, for all who ail, I sell the proper cure. For every ail, for all who ill, I sell the proper cure. For every ill, for all who ill, I sell the proper cure. All right. So that is a little bit of a piece from Donizetti's Elixir of Love. That's perfectly appropriate to our topic today of permaculture and spirituality, science and the burden of proof, and the direction of the burden of proof. See, Dulcamara in the Elixir of Love represents a character that goes back a long ways in the commedia dell'arte tradition of theater, of live street theater throughout Europe. And this particular kind of character was a sort of Flimflam Man, a mountebank. And this kind of thing was really common, especially in peasant agricultural communities throughout Europe. There has been a long tradition of these people visiting these villages, peasant villages, and selling quack medicines and also selling agricultural techniques. And there's a really kind of good reason why. It's that, farming has always been a really difficult field, pun intended. And one of the reasons why is it's just the basic economics of farming and civilizations, going back for as long as there's been civilizations. One of the base ideas of the economics of farming is that your farming, where your civilization gets its food, is like the base unit of productivity for your society. It's the basis of the economy. Think about it this way. If you are a king or a pharaoh and you want to build a pyramid, or you want to build a keep because you're a king, or if you're a Rockefeller and you want to build a railroad system or have a car corporation or something like this, the basic unit, that you're going to use to make your product, whatever it is, to pick one of those options, is going to be your labor and your workforce, right? And if you can afford to feed and hire and keep a workforce of 100 people going, that's going to determine how fast you can build your keep, how many different countries you can go take over if you're a warlord, or how many cars you're going to be able to build in a short period of time if you're a corporation. So there's just always been a sort of policy in place, a need, in a sense, to artificially depress agricultural wages and labor wages, right? So that's been a long-term policy going back to like medieval times. What did we do back then? We would tax directly off the productivity of farm families. So if a farm family could make, 100 bushels of wheat and they needed 3 bushels of wheat to live, then we would, tax them up front with the 97 bushels of wheat and only leave them the 3. If they're lazy and they can't produce the 100 bushels, then they're going to be in trouble in the winter. So it keeps the whip cracking, as they say, on that agricultural labor. And the whole idea of it is to free up cheap labor for specialization of a society and an economy. So the more your society can produce food very cheaply, the more specialization you can have in society. So this has meant that for pretty much the whole time there has been farming, farmers have always been an oppressed caste. They've always had some of the lowest wages in a society, because everything else in the society is based on suppressing that agricultural labor to make the society cheap. And if you look at it today, we do the same thing. We haven't raised in the United States agricultural exemption for minimum wage since the 1960s. So that it's still, we have agricultural laborers who are working for about $3 an hour. So everyone else who does farming, you're always competing with that. So what does that mean? If farming has always been a difficult field to work in, then the lives of peasants and the lives of peasant farmers has always been a tough one. And that has always made them open prey to people who are mountebanks, who are Flimflam Man, con men, grifters, as we say on the internet today. So there's just long been a tradition of that. In fact, that's kind of how the whole system of science around agriculture evolved, is because of these sort of mountebanks. And so we have all of these traditions in the Commedia dell'arte, talking about these kinds of guys who would go from place to place and sell miracle elixirs that would try to, they're trying to sell something to make the lives of these peasant farmers seem more bearable to them. So they're, special miracle elixirs to get rid of your rats. and the whooping cough and, make the woman of your dreams fall in love with you. And they've also always sold agricultural techniques too. This is just a long-term thing. So one of these that's really popular, like in modern alt ag today, goes back to like the 1930s, and it's kind of called like Albery Ratios. So Albrecht was a soil scientist who actually did some really good soil science. Like a lot of these guys actually they were educated people. Dr. Dul Kamara was probably actually a real doctor, and he just figured out that he could make money by selling, fake potions instead of real medicine. So Albrecht also did some good science, and Albrecht also did some bad science. And he created a whole system. So this is kind of the way that the agricultural complex, science agricultural complex worked. Is you would create some new way of having a farm product, right? Something that will improve the productivity, and then you sell that. You sell that to the farmers. That is the way that the agricultural science funded itself, And so Albrecht came up with these magic soil ratios, and they really were like magic, They did, and he claimed that they would have all these amazing benefits to health and nutrition, make you impervious to the diseases that were rife in farm communities because they were impoverished, make you so that you didn't age so quickly because farm work really ages the body. And so a lot of this became like the nutrient-dense food movement. And it also really appealed to farmers who were very religious. They were Christian. So this idea that Albrecht salesmen came up with to promote the Albrecht ratios was based on like this idea that there was this perfect Garden of Eden soil. Once the earth was this Garden of Eden, and we had perfect soil, and we humans, through our bad farming, our degenerative farming, have destroyed the Garden of Eden soil. So if we can recreate the Garden of Eden soil, then all of these magic kind of benefits come from that and from the food. And you don't have to spray, and you get super high productivity and all that. The problem with it is, we've now had like 100 years of science on it. And you cannot say, this is the important thing about science. Science does not tell you truths of the universe. And science cannot prove a negative easily, which means science cannot easily show that Albrecht ratios have no impact and never do anything. They don't work, in that sense. But what they can do, what science is good at, is testing our positive claims. So Albrecht salespeople were saying, the Albrecht ratio soil would create really nutrient-dense food, and you can use a Brix meter to measure it, and it'll solve your diseases, and it'll have really super great growth in the soil and do all these positive things, right? So what we do have now is 100 years of tests of those positive claims. And what we don't have is any evidence that those claims actually work, that the Albrecht ratios actually do that stuff that we claim about them, or that the salespeople were claiming about them. So this tells you the direction of the burden of proof in science, and why this is so important in fields like agriculture and in medicine and things like this. What it does is it tests our claims. So the burden of proof rests on people who are making claims. And the reason why that's so important is because of guys like Dul Kamara, Dr. Dul Kamara, making these claims about all of this, the magic claims of their miracle elixirs. If I'm making a claim that this elixir, you can use a tiny amount of it and throw it on your farm field, and it'll triple your productivity. And then there's science that tests that, and it doesn't actually do that. It doesn't have a real significant measurable impact on the productivity. Then what do you think about my claim? It's probably something I shouldn't be claiming, right? So that's kind of the direction for the burden of proof and things. So if I may, I talk about Albery Ratios some because there's still a lot of people out there who are even today selling this stuff. You know, when I was a kid, guys would go through farm communities and they'd sell Albery Ratio stuffs. And they would usually also sell like knives and vacuum cleaners and like pills, vitamins, right? If you didn't buy their soil amendment, maybe you'd buy some vitamins, you know? It's just the same as it was 300, 400 years ago when we were having these depictions of the Commedia dell'arte. It's a tradition that goes all the way back then. And the funny thing is that some of the guys who are out there who are celebrities talking about and selling Albery Ratios, and now they also sell things like miracle bacterial sprays and stuff. They worked for the companies. They actually were people hired by the companies that were going around to those communities to my community when I was a kid. So there's this kind of unbroken tradition there. And, because I saw it taking advantage of people when I was growing up, I'm kind of sensitive to that. So this is one reason why I sometimes may seem to disagree with some of the claims that I see in the permaculture community. Maybe you've noticed that. I tend to have a higher sort of burden of proof for the claims that I will make. If there's not, it is because of this direction of the burden of proof, right? Some people in the permaculture community or regenerative agriculture community today will turn around that burden of proof. And they'll say, for example, well, they didn't prove that this doesn't work. And remember, that's, not the direction that the burden of proof should work, right? It should test our claims. So if someone is talking about something like key lining was a technique that I've taught about for a long time until there were some recent studies, and they tested the specific kinds of claims we'd been making. And those claims, for example, were like that key lining dramatically reduces irrigation, that it increases productivity, that it increases the forage in pasture, and that because of the increased photosynthesis, it increases carbon sequestration too, right? So again, it's kind of selling it like a panacea. It's going to be good for the environment. It's going to have higher nutrient density. It's all those same kind of claims again. So we've now had a few studies that test it, and there's just not good evidence to support those claims we've been making. So some people turn that around and say, well, they didn't prove that this has no effect, right? There were small, it's kind of small effects. So think about it this way. If you take a chisel plow and you take it through a field, if nothing else, you have measurably changed the visual impact of the field. Like you have done a thing. You've done a thing. So of course, there's going to be some measurable things that happen mechanically when you do a thing. Oh, what are the reasons for this? What are the actual mechanisms there? But more importantly, did we get evidence to support these claims we're making about productivity and irrigation and all that? To me, I would say, and I've actually spoken to some of the researchers now. I've not spoken. I have communicated via the internet. And they told me, we did not find the evidence we thought we were going to find to back these claims. In fact, one of them, someone who was involved in that, published specifically and said, we shouldn't be making these claims about key lining anymore. So I no longer make those claims about key lining. It's as simple as that. And there are quite a few things like that. I'm very, very careful about what I claim because I don't want to be a grifter. I want to know that the things that I tell you actually will have this measurable positive benefit. Right. So I also want to say that that this is a very Mullisonian permaculture thing. In fact, we could call this a historic definition of permaculture. And we can use all kinds of definitions of permaculture, right? We could say permaculture is working with nature instead of against it. We could say it's a design system. Now that's like a functional definition. There's a historic definition of what it is too. And what that definition is that Bill Mollison was observing this history of agri-scams, right? Because it wasn't just the con men either. It involved real scientists like Albrecht. And that also included the Green Revolution science, because this was the same kind of model those people were using. The university system came up with a set of tools that really did have a measurable, significant impact on total net productivity per farm, per person, right? And that's fossil fuels and pesticides and tilling the bejesus out of the soil. Now, there are negatives to that as well. But we didn't sell those negatives. We went around to people all over the world, just like Dr. Dulcamara did. And actually, this time we didn't talk to the people in the agricultural communities. The Green Revolution salespeople went directly to the local warlords and to the aristocracy and the people who were building cars and keeps and pyramids. And we went to them and we said, if you do these things, you're going to be richer because it's going to drive down that basic unit of society. You're going to get more food to feed more workers for less money, less cost. So it's going to make you richer. And of course, people, aristocrats around the world bought that. It had huge negative impacts on farmers and farming communities and indigenous societies because we were kicking people off the land. So Bill Mollison, we could say that the context, the historical definition in context of permaculture was coming to that whole thing and saying, let's evaluate these claims we're making because we're leaving things out. We're leaving out the real world impact and sustainability and all of this stuff from these claims. So Bill Mollison, for a long time, was really rigorous in the kind of claims he made too. So we have a whole tradition in permaculture about this, and we've gotten away from that, in my opinion. In fact, I just saw someone who's kind of a leader in the movement say online, I don't care if there's evidence to support this claim, the claims I'm making, because I know they're true. It doesn't matter to me if there's evidence for them. That really worries me a lot because it means that we're selling things and we don't know that the things we're selling are actually working. And that's a problem. So I just like to be really careful in those claims that I'm making. And I would like to suggest that you do the same. So if you see things, for example, in my book, then they have really good science. All the things that I focus on a lot, things like nurse logs on contour. They have lots of studies that demonstrate they actually affect in a lot of different cases in all different climates and different types of soil. They have big positive benefits. So those are the kinds of things that I like to focus on and the claims I like to make, and that's what Bill Mollison used to do as well. Some of the things that Bill Mollison claimed may not have panned out, and he actually changed some of his claims as he went, as he found out the science. All right. So that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about here, and I want to So I also want to tie this back to the idea of spirituality, because I found out a couple of colleagues were kind of questioning some of the things that I claim, because like my book, I talk about spirituality. I do not talk about there being real fairies who are real, who make measurable impacts on the landscape. But to me, a beautiful, abundant environment surrounding me is incredibly spiritually rewarding. And doing this work of regenerating a landscape and seeing it come back to life, this is spiritually fulfilling to me in a deep way. And I think that we are actually making a religious claim when we deny that these things have an impact on us. When you can go and sit in a beautiful field, a real meadow at dusk in late summer and hear the cicadas sing and hear and see the sunset. This is a magical, spiritually enriching thing. And for people to make a fallacious appeal to authority, that if someone talks about that, they're not scientific enough, that's actually a religious belief, an unproven claim. They're believing that we as humans somehow need to cut ourselves off from that, cut ourselves off from this very important part of being human in the name of being science or something like that. And that has nothing to do with the accuracy and validity of the claims that I'm making. So I'd like you to consider that too. When we talk about transcendence, we're talking about transcending the false dichotomy between us being spiritually alive beings and connecting with each other in this real way that we connect, and making space for that intuitive part of ourselves. And at the same time, we're not believing making claims about things that we can't actually prove. So we use reason in a very rigorous way to solve the questions of reason and hold ourselves accountable for making the claims we make. And we're also okay with using art and music and singing songs and having a spiritually enriched life as well. Because there's actually good science to show that that makes people happier, that it makes us feel more complete. It actually can make us more effective as people and as communicators in some ways too. So there's science to back that and to back those claims as well. So when we ignore that, we're actually being anti-science. So that's where we're transcending this false dichotomy. And I think that a lot of us in this movement, that's exactly the spot we're in. We love science, and we want to know what the science has to say about things. And we also want to connect with nature and each other in this deep, intuitive, spiritual feeling way. And we don't have to believe in things that aren't real or make claims that aren't valid in order to do that. All right. So that is kind of my thinking for today about this relationship between science and reason, the burden of proof and the direction of the burden of proof, and our spiritual sides, and how that all meets up in this work we do as permaculturists. All right. So if anyone had questions or asked anything or was joining me today, then I could not see it. And I'll try to figure that out more next time. Oh, look, I can do this. Look. Thank you for watching. All right, everybody. Thanks one more time. And I hope you have a happy, happy Halloween. All right. Bye, everybody.